From courtside the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoop heads. This is episode 567. I am Andrew in the forum, Andrew NLSC on X. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, it's time to talk basketball and basketball gaming once again, so please, tip us off.
I'm happy to be here as always. This is going to be a shorter show, as Andrew and I have not had much time to connect over the last few days. We've been super busy with our lives, but we wanted to tackle a community topic suggestion, and it was submitted on Twitter by leader of the Foot Clan at aka_Chuck_Cross. He states, in one of the future NLSC podcast episodes, can one of the questions be, where do we see NBA 2K in 5 years, such as what will be implemented, how will the game look, and what gameplay edition will be a must-have every year after that. So, Andrew, the NBA 2K series, obviously the only true 5-on-5 basketball sim being made right now. There's no competition in the space. I think in 5 years' time that we will have competition in the space, but the funny thing about that prediction is that I said the same thing back in like 2020 when we were talking about this, and look what happened. We still don't have a competitor in this space, but I have a feeling that at some point something's got to give. Somebody else is going to jump into this space, get the NBA license, and try to take up some of that market share. But one of the key pieces as it relates to gaming in general in 5 years is, where do we see console gaming going? Do we see it growing in popularity? Do we see it decreasing in popularity and more people moving into the PC realm, etc.? So first, I'll throw it over to you. Before we tackle where the NBA 2K series will be in 5 years, where do you think gaming is going?
I mean, I think console gaming is still going to be very popular. PC gaming is always going to be a thing, obviously, but as far as sports gaming, basketball gaming, all genres really, I think console is still going to have a big share of the market. I can't help but feel cynical when it comes to things like microtransactions, pushy mechanics in that regard, and really forcing people to really grind or pay to simply enjoy the game. Not just pay to win, pay to enjoy is what we're heading towards. I did see that Valve has recently updated their terms of service, their rules regarding in-game advertising. You can't have the mandatory ads like a freemium mobile game on Steam, so that is a good sign. Hopefully they stick with that. So at the very least, on Steam, we won't have forced ads. We won't have ads to unlock extra rewards. They're not allowing that. Hopefully the consoles will follow suit there, because I think that's a good idea. But cynically, Derek, I do think we are going to see more greed in gaming, unfortunately.
I agree. I think that the sad reality is we've only seen an increase in quote-unquote free-to-play games that are not truly free-to-play, right? Where it's like, hey, download our game, and it's advertised as free to get in, but so much of the game is just hidden behind paywalls. And this is in all genres, right? I mean, we're seeing this in MMORPGs, RPGs, adventure games. We're seeing this in sports games, etc. And I think that the end goal of these companies, obviously, is to make far and above the normal base price of a game would be. And they succeed in that goal by getting these gamers in the front door with that free-to-play advertising, right? Or that super low-cost game that it's like, oh, this game's only $10, this game's only $20, etc. I can jump into that, and then boom, 70 to 80% of the content is hidden behind a paywall. And instead of only making, $60, $70 if they had priced the game that way, and then they make no more off of that customer, they're instead making $5 here, $10 there, $20 there, etc., off of one consumer, and it adds up to hundreds of dollars. We've seen the screenshots on social media of people showing their PlayStation transactions towards NBA 2K and showing their transactions towards Madden, etc. And it's not one purchase for $400, right? It's not, it's multiple lines of transactions. It's a little at a time. It's $10 here for VC. It's $20 there. it's $50 there and another 10 and another 20. And then over time, this person has been playing the game for 6 months and they've been putting money into the game every month, and it's actually added up to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And I think that these companies know that tiptoeing the line is okay as long as you don't go over it, right? And they're doing whatever they possibly can to max out profits without doing anything that would be considered illegal or that would go viral on social media to, basically cancel them out. So my opinion is, definitely agree. I think in 5 years, we are absolutely going to have it worse as it relates to microtransaction BS, as it relates to, paying for content that should be readily available in a game. But the reason why I brought up where do we see gaming going as it relates to console, PC, etc., is because there was debate, especially in 2023 and parts of 2024, about consoles becoming obsolete, right? That playing on consoles was not as popular as it once was, and that developers don't want to make games for consoles like they used to. And people were debating whether it would be more gaming in the PC realm, in the streaming realm, etc. So I did a quick Google search, and I want to give you the AI overview, and I actually agree with the response here. So my question was, where do we see console gaming in 5 years? And the AI overview states, in 5 years, console gaming is expected to continue to grow with more immersive experiences, increased accessibility, and new creative voices. And then it says growth. The console gaming industry is projected to be worth $74 billion by 2025.
Wow.
The market is growing. That's a lot, yeah. The market is growing due to the rise of online multiplayer games and esports. Improved internet connectivity and cloud gaming make console gaming more accessible. And then it states immersive experiences, extended reality, so XR experiences are expected to become the norm, which will have a profound influence on people, society, and industry. So they're thinking bigger picture in relation to that. Accessibility, a maturing cloud gaming environment will make games available to more players, and more players and independent creators will join, bringing new ideas and perspectives. And lastly, it states new creative voices. A larger global audience will take the medium, bringing new creative voices. So I agree with this. I think console gaming is not going anywhere. Not 5 years down the road, not 10 years down the road, not 20 years down the road. And it's because of that convenience, right? It's the getting the console, it's plugging in the controller, it's accessing your game right off the console. You don't need discs anymore. In fact, some of the consoles don't even have disc players. And I know that you and I hate that, right?
Of course.
We're not big fans of that because we're big fans of physical media and
Absolutely.
we understand the importance of them, but we also understand the convenience of not having a disc, right? And that makes these games even more accessible, right? It also can make them more disposable, but we've already talked about that many times. But what I think is going to end up happening is the console space is just going to continue to be incredibly popular, and it's not going anywhere, and developers are going to continue releasing for consoles. I will say that PS5, and you would agree, and Series X consoles have been monumentally disappointing as it relates to the amount of titles that have been released for both. There has been very few games released on PS5 and Xbox Series X, and paling in comparison to PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3.
There's been no killer app so far this generation, like that one big game. We've had the re-release of GTA 5. We've had, successful games, don't get me wrong, but as far as that one big title that defines a generation, we haven't had multiple titles as we did with 6th gen and 7th gen, obviously, but even just one killer app hasn't come along yet.
Yeah, and I think that is questionable. I'm not sure why we have less games being made for these consoles than past generations, because PS4 and Xbox One were loaded. right? Like that generation has a ton of games and a ton of memorable games and games that even came out early for those consoles in the first couple of years of their existence. And then all of a sudden, it feels like a lot of companies are not tackling games on this newest hardware, and we're not getting those releases. But yeah, Andrew, thoughts on console gaming in comparison to PC gaming, and where do you see both going?
Well, I'd agree with the optimistic take that it's not going anywhere. I don't see it being phased out for mobile gaming or anything like that. I think a lot of hardcore gamers still want that in-depth experience that you don't get from pretty much any mobile title. I do a little bit of mobile gaming here and there. I actually touch on that in next week's Monday Tip-Off and compare how AAA gaming is in some ways getting dangerously close to mobile gaming as far as the greed, and we just touched on that, the microtransactions, etc. I know we brought it up before, Derek, but it continues to be a problem. And that is where I'm less optimistic about console gaming, PC gaming, where it's going. The big thing for me is disposable games, and we've talked about that before as well, have we not? That games are being made more disposable all the time. They're losing features when servers get shut down. There is so much content that requires online connectivity. Even offline versions of modes, you need to be connected to play them. The other day, Derek, when the PlayStation Network was down, I couldn't continue my NBA 2K14 my career because even though it's an offline save, it still needs to validate it online with my account to say, yes, this is my save file. So that has been an issue since the 8th generation. We're going to see more of that, I fear, more server-side content, more always online. And again, that's been a problem since the 8th generation. So I'm less optimistic about that kind of stuff. Games will continue to be made. Consoles and gaming PCs will continue to be made. But the games themselves are going to follow some really bad trends. That's my fear. And I know it sounds cynical, but there's a pattern here.
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned with that as well. I have a question, actually, before we get into the NBA 2K portion of this. What are your thoughts on VR? Has it ever been something that has interested you? What do you think of that industry trend? I don't think it's as popular as people thought it would be at this point. It's not something that I've ever been personally interested in. Do you see that growing, or do you think it stays pretty much the same 5 years from now?
I have a feeling that it's going to be pretty niche overall. I think a lot of people still enjoy having a controller in their hands. People often get motion sickness or simply don't like that overwhelming experience of VR. I think it's going to be a thing moving forward, absolutely. And I think there is a market for it. There are games that really lend themselves well to that experience and kind of a really immersive experience. As far as a game like NBA 2K, sports games, etc., platformers, I mean, it's an interesting idea to play that in VR, and I know there is a VR version of 2K, obviously, but yeah, I just don't think it's ever going to replace traditional gaming because you have those issues with motion sickness, people feeling disorientated in the VR headsets, and just having that preference for having the controller in their hands.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I'll ever entertain it because I like feeling in control. And some listeners may think that sounds backwards, but when I'm in that virtual reality, I'm not actually in control of what's happening in my true life in front of me, right? Like, that is a big problem for me. And I think that I would be disoriented if I tried it. I feel like it would be not as comfortable, I would say, as holding a controller and experiencing a game that way. So yeah, and I would definitely agree too about the niche part. I think that it will never be as big as people projected it to be and how big the media tries to make it sound it will be. And they've been talking about it that way for like the last 10, 15 years, right?
Reminds me
the
of 3D.
VR experience.
Like that whole 3D being that gimmick that comes back every so often. Remember 3D TVs, huge about 15 years ago. NBA 2K11, NBA 2K12 had 3D support, but then it just went away.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I want to point out too that having eyewear and being immersed in like a virtual reality type experience is also not new within the last 10 to 15 years. That they were trying that with stuff in the 90s.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
In video games and whatnot and other experiences. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
But as it relates to the NBA 2K series, Andrew, 5 years from now, I'll say again, I do think that we're going to have a competitor in the space. And why I'm more confident than ever is because of the success of EA Sports College Football 25.
Yes.
Because I think that paved the way for a college basketball game made by EA Sports, and then also the return of NBA Live. I also don't think it really makes sense to have only one player in this space. I feel like because of the global popularity of the NBA and the amount of developers that are out there, it doesn't need to be EA Sports. It doesn't need to be the NBA Live series, that there has to be somebody that eventually comes in and tries to compete in the space. And I really do hope that happens, because that could also kind of change the trajectory of the NBA 2K series and possibly make them more fair to the gamer, possibly make them up their game, possibly, make them be even more innovative than they are right now. So my prediction with the 2K series in the next 5 years, I think that it's still incredibly popular, but I think that there will be competition in the space taking some of that market share. I think that 2K is going to lean even harder and heavier into that online scene. I think that they're going to continue to try to be innovative in that way as it relates to, making builds, playing with people, giving people different scenery to play in, all of that stuff. I think at that point we're going to be on new consoles. We're going to be on PlayStation 6, right? We're going to be on a new Xbox potentially as well. And I think that personally, this is my opinion, I think that we officially see the bigger jump, right? We didn't, I think from a graphics standpoint, we finally see the jump, because I don't think that PS4 to PS5 was the jump people were expecting.
Agreed.
Right? In fact, a lot of games on PS4 and PS5 basically look the same graphically as far as quality wise. Like I don't even see a jump really at all, to be completely honest with you, with all the games that I've seen. So I think we finally get that jump. I think 2K comes out of the gate looking absolutely incredible on these new consoles. I think that with more space on these consoles and whatnot, and obviously there's always space on the PC, but more space on these consoles, you might even see more content in the game as it relates to my NBA eras, as it relates to classic content and whatnot, and they'll utilize that to the fullest. But yeah, my opinion is that there'll be a competitor in the space. That will be taking some of the market share, and in turn, 2K will need to up their game, right? And I think that on the newest consoles, they're going to dazzle with amazing visuals. From a gameplay perspective, I think that they may have to up their game as well, and maybe we'll see some improvements to foot planning and whatnot, but I'm not holding my breath. But maybe we'll see some gameplay improvements as it relates to just more balance from a gameplay perspective. I don't think microtransactions are going anywhere. In fact, I think they'll only increase.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think 5 years from now, we'll have a strong competitor in the space. NBA 2K will still be doing their thing. And yeah, that's basically where I see it going.
Well, competition is absolutely the key variable here, the necessity in the space. As we've said so many times before, we stand by it. That being said, I do think that 2K will continue to improve here and there and innovate even without competition or immediate competition. You look at something like Pro Play, you look at what they've done with My NBA Eras. Clearly, there are people at Take-Two, at Visual Concepts, who care about the series, the developers, the producers working on the series, the suits. They don't care about anything but money, obviously, but the people actually working on the games do have that passion for NBA 2K. I do believe that. Whether they always get it right or not, or whether they necessarily interact with us in a way that we'd like, that's a whole other matter. But clearly they do want to put that effort in. They are developing these technologies, pro play and My NBA eras, etc. So I think the innovation will continue irrespective of whether they have competition or not. That being said, competition should make things so much better, hopefully fairer to the gamer. Might also make them rethink some of the direction as far as things like open worlds, although EA is also looking at open worlds in their games. I know that 2K is also bringing the open world concept to the WWE 2K series, so get ready for that, wrestling fans. That's coming to that as well. The city, I think it's the island, is coming to WWE 2K25, so yeah, not too thrilled about that. They're going to keep pushing in those directions, especially if they don't have the competition to provide that pure sim basketball experience. They're going to try and compete with other genres, be everything to everyone, bring in things like Gravity Ball, and be the testing ground for concepts like that. Maybe they pull back on that if there's another basketball game, NBA Live, for example, really catering to the hardcore sim heads and winning people over that way, being the traditional experience. I'd really like that. That is my suggested direction for a competitor in the space, obviously. But competition is vital at the end of the day. But I do still think they will get there as far as enhanced graphics, as long as the technology allows it, and further gameplay enhancements, etc., even without competition, but it's going to go much further if they have that push as well.
And I agree that they're innovating out of love for the series, right? I agree that they're also innovating in order to stay ahead in case any competitor jumps in to the space. And, there's been a lot of things that they've added over the years. So obviously the WNBA somewhat recently.
That too, yeah.
My NBA eras, right? That's a huge undertaking, and that was added to the game with, no direct competition in the space. Pro play, which in my opinion is the best addition they've had in years from a gameplay perspective. My brother and I are absolutely loving all the pro play animations. It makes the gameplay night and day more fun in comparison to 2K24. Just the drives to the basket, how those look, different layup animations and dunk animations that play out, the player to player interactions, the smoothness, all of that stuff. Like, pro play, in my opinion, kicks major butt, and I hope they keep implementing it because it definitely adds to the authenticity. And you're right, they did that without competition in the space. But I feel like they still need to keep doing that in order to still be incredibly strong when competition comes into the space. He also asks, what additions do we think will be released at the time, and what will be the average gamer's choice? And I think that it's going to be very similar to the way it is right now, right? Like, NBA League Pass is not going anywhere. They'll probably offer that again in 5 years, right? Where you can buy a specific version of the game, high dollar version, and boom, you get League Pass.
It's a decent deal, actually, to be honest.
It is. And the structure that they have currently makes too much sense to go away from it anytime soon, as far as having like the Legend Edition, right? And whatnot, and those higher tiers for, getting more virtual currency at the start and getting more My Team packs and all of that stuff. So I think that structure, my opinion is that structure isn't going anywhere, and it will probably be very similar or even the same 5 years from now.
I think so as well. And obviously they're going to bring in more animations with Pro Play. Hopefully they can apply that to historical players. We've been big advocates for that as well. And as far as historical content, they can obviously add more eras if they get the license for that, and some of the earlier eras they can do in a minimalist way if they license about 100 players. The maths was done in our forum a few months back. And as far as what I'd personally like to see is more interstitial starting points for My NBA eras. The early 90s, the late 90s, early 80s, late 80s, things like that. You could add multiple starting points. You could add multiple starting points, multiple paths you could take in My Career. You could really expand on the storytelling and the open world, which I think they're going to do with My Career and the city. So I see them going in those directions, expanding what they've already done. And there's certainly stuff you can do there. As we said before, Derek, as much stuff as in NBA 2K, as much content as in the game, modes and all the depth there is, there's still ideas that they can tap into.
It would be a cool one? An NBA Today type setup where it shows a current game that's going on. So let's say it's a Monday night and let's say it's Dallas Mavericks versus Los Angeles Lakers. Got to bring up those two teams because those are the teams that everybody's been talking about recently. But let's say it's a Monday night matchup between Dallas and the Lakers. And you can click on the game and say, start me in the second quarter. And what it does is it brings you to that matchup with the true real life end of first quarter score, and then you decide what happens for the rest of the game. Or you can start it at halftime, or you can start it in the third quarter. And I think that would be a popular feature.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, with a lot of people, especially if you could share that experience with others somehow. But yeah, how cool would that be? So, it's the end of the third quarter and the Lakers are down by 10, and you have the option to pick up the game starting in the fourth quarter, and you make a comeback with the Lakers and you win that game. And in real life, they lost, and you're like, man, I was able to pull them through. Right. So there's definitely a lot of things that they still haven't done with these video games. And I think cut-ins like that and options like that, I think would be super popular.
Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dynamic Season in NBA Live 10, how you'd follow along with the season. You could jump into games that have happened and have got the dynamic DNA, the synergy data for those games. You replay them with the authentic lineups, but you can change the results, get the custom playoff brackets at the end of the year. Very innovative idea for the time. So that's taking it to the next level, jumping into games in progress. Yeah, that is awesome.
And it does feel like it's possible too, right? Because basically what they could do is they could have it programmed where, a couple minutes into the fourth quarter or whatever, the end of the third quarter is available with those two teams on the floor with the accurate score, et cetera. And then still, halftime would be available if you want to jump in there. So I think that would be cool. And I think that they'll think of something over the next 5 years like that people talk about, that creates buzz, because they've been good at that, right? Historically, creating that buzz. They created a lot of buzz with the My NBA eras and the announcement of new eras, with the Pro Play implementation and whatnot. And with NBA 2K16, with all the new features they added to that, with being able to create a court in your own jerseys in My League and all of that. So, yeah, I think that over the next 5 years, they'll definitely have something similar to what I mentioned to get, people talking.
And considering how much my team and my career already run on live service content, it's the same concept, really, kind of making the game fresh daily.
Exactly. I have one more question for you as it relates to this. So I was reading this, Video Games in 2030, Will I Still Need a Console Gaming System? That Depends article, written by Mike Snyder, and it's a USA Today article. This article was written in 2019. There's a line in there that states, console gaming is in transition to on-demand gaming services, and this transition has already begun. Gaming is going digital, and this will continue to change how Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo manufacture consoles. It already has. So we already talked about consoles going digital, foregoing the disk drive, all of that. But do we think that console gaming could transition into some type of TV streaming service? Have you thought about that? Like something connected to like a monthly service, et cetera, that has nothing to do with a gaming console box? Is that something that would possibly foster in the future and hurt console sales?
I mean, I could see studios wanting to do it, especially if they can charge a monthly fee for games. There's no more ownership of games anymore. It's just basically renting games every month. Maybe you have a big library of them. Maybe it's cheaper than buying a new game every month, sure, but it's still that monthly cost. They'd love it. I don't think it would necessarily be great for consumers. I'm not a big fan of the idea. I do like the idea of ownership of games, as I'm sure you are as well, and I think a lot of people are, especially looking at what's happened with streaming services. It used to be that it was better than pay TV, better than cable. Now you've got to subscribe to multiple services. Now it's costing the same as pay TV, as cable was for so many years. So even as people are cutting the cord, they're finding that the cost is the same with streaming services going up all the time, more ads going into it. So I'd find that prospect very concerning, very daunting if they were to do that. I think it would be very anti-consumer at the end of the day. To that end, I could see the suits really loving that idea. But not having the ownership of the games, having games taken off the service, disappearing as it is, games disappear from platforms for purchase after a few years anyway, and at the behest of the publisher and developer. So I'm not a fan of the idea, but could we rule out the possibility of it happening? Unfortunately not.
And I agree. And the reason why I brought this up is in this article, that idea came from Alexis Macklin, research manager at market intelligence firm Green Insights. And she had stated that console gaming, as we know it, is already dead. And she went on to state the new consoles from Microsoft and Sony may very well be the last consoles in the traditional sense. The next wave of consoles may be closer to a streaming media device than a traditional console box, with the focus more on accessories. So kind of going where I was going with that, right? Like a streaming service as opposed to you owning a console and owning the games. So that is scary, in my opinion. I do not want gaming to go in to that direction, and I don't think that's where it will go in the next 5 years. But I can see it being looked at heavily, right?
Oh yeah, don't give them ideas.
See, yeah, exactly, and I can see it being tested and whatnot, and seeing how popular it could be and how much money they can make off of it. We may see something similar come into fruition, but I really hope that that type of gaming, that idea, doesn't like become popular. Though it would be great if it did.
Well, I guess they kind of already are testing that with some of the vaults for Xbox and PlayStation, the older games that you can play with that higher subscription tier. So the technology is there. They can do it. Whether they would do it for new releases, yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, I suppose. I guess it would also require a lot of cooperation between Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, which we probably aren't going to see, so maybe that will save us from a bleak future, their refusal to cooperate in that respect. But yeah, I wouldn't want to see that come to fruition, because we've seen the problems for the consumer when it comes to TV streaming services. So yeah, fingers crossed.
I also want to say before we end this segment that I think, as it relates to PC gaming, I think in 5 years that's going to look almost identical, right? I mean, we already have Steam, which is just an enormous library, for purchasing games, whether it be free to play or not. And I think that Steam is only going to become more popular. I think that the system, the way it works right now, is working incredibly well for PC gamers and developers alike. And I think you would agree. I think PC gaming is going to probably be basically the same in 5 years.
For the most part, I'd agree, yeah. I will say that GOG.com, Good Old Games, they're stepping up their efforts to preserve old games. They've got some lists out there that people can vote on at the moment, games that you'd like to see them try and preserve, try and get the rights to save them and make them available in perpetuity. So that is a great initiative. Hope it succeeds. I've certainly voted on a few games. Would love to see the Lemmings series readily available once again, Derek. So, yeah, hopefully that succeeds.
That would be great, but also I think we'll have reliable PS4 emulation in 5 years.
Looking forward to it.
I think that they're already working on it right now, and I think that in 5 years we're going to be able to boot up NBA 2K14 for the PS4, but on an emulator, and that it will work well on most systems, whether it be low, medium, or high end. And I do think as well, and in 5 years' time, I think that people will, be able to tackle mods on various games. And I think that will be game changing, for people who, love a game like NBA 2K14, which, was different than the PC release. The PC release was the PS3, Xbox 360 version, but 2K14 for Xbox One, PS4 is untapped in the way of modding and customizing and all of that stuff, and that's a favorite of many. So yeah, I think that PS4 emulation is going to rock, and I think that it will be fully implemented in 5 years.
I mean, look what John Z1 has done with NBA Jam on Fire Edition for PS3. So yeah, the mind reels with the possibilities.
Exactly.
So thank you to the leader of the Foot Clan for the topic suggestion there. That is our take on it. Let us know what you think about the future of gaming, the future of NBA 2K, the potential future of NBA Live or another competitor in the space. It is a very interesting topic to think about, Derek.
I also just love when the community interacts with the show. Whether they're coming up with topic suggestions or they're, answering the mailbag, etc. We have a lot of loyal listeners out there, and they do such a great job coming up with material that we can talk about on the show. So we appreciate you.
With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, NBA-Live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media, so we can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D4FreeG and at D4Free84. I'm also on the NLSC, D4Free, and on YouTube, D4Free.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, give a look to the NLSC itself, NBA-Live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.